Okay, thank you everybody for being here. As John said, my name is Gregory Christakos, and the title of my project, as you can see here, is Finding Your Center, a suitability analysis to locate a town center in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Just to give you an overview of what to expect tonight, I'm going to start with my introduction and background about Sierra Vista and the town center question. I'll then discuss my data sources a little bit. Then I'll move on to the study area and the town center sites under consideration themselves. I'll also discuss my methods, analysis, and results, and finally I'll finish with my conclusions. Just as an introduction, a prior analysis done by Al Harvey for the City of Redlands analyzed whether their abandoned downtown mall would be suitable for residential development. What they were curious about accomplishing was seeing whether or not that site would be appropriate for residential zoning in addition to its existing commercial zoning. And they're able to successfully determine that. And so my analysis kind of builds up off of that previous project where I'm looking at rezoning and residential development, but as applied to 5 different town center sites in Sierra Vista. And so as my question here states, do any of the 5 potential town center sites meet residential suitability necessary for successful mixed-use zoning and development? And so you might be wondering, well, what is residential suitability? And in the case of this analysis, it's finding an area or areas within the city where people have easy access to different amenities as well as having close proximity to them. And the results of this analysis could have potential future development implications as well for Sierra Vista moving forward. So, about Sierra Vista itself and the town center question, Sierra Vista identified a town center as something they want to build through a series of community inputs as well as city council directives. The town center itself would provide improved livability for the community as well as provide identity. And in addition, it would give the overall residents a sense of place with where they live. A successful downtown would help, or a town center, would help attract residents as well as businesses to the area and overall result in growth. So again, this study solves for the residential suitability of a town center site. And you might be wondering, well, why is it important to look into this? Well, here we have 2 examples of failed town centers where you can tell that people obviously don't live there and it's been abandoned. And so to not take into consideration the residential suitability could result in something like what you see here, where it's an abandoned project and therefore a waste of money. But rather, you would like to see something like Tucson's downtown, which has recently been on the upswing, and more people are wanting to locate themselves there as a result of increased convenience through like the streetcar and other developments like that. Another downtown or town center worth looking at is Bisbee, Arizona, which is right next door to Sierra Vista. This particular site, you could see here, it's lively and people want to live there for those who live within Cochise County. Before I show you any maps tonight, I should say my data was all obtained from Sierra Vista's GIS as well as Cochise County's GIS. And all field data was obtained using the Recon app as well that the city uses. You can see my coordinate information there as well for these maps. But here we have the study area that I used for this project. It's Sierra Vista. It's located southeast of here in Cochise County. You can see that this boundary is not actually the city of Sierra Vista, but is rather the Metropolitan Planning Organization's boundary. And this consists of the city of Sierra Vista that you see in dark blue, the county enclaves that exist within the city limits, those are in the lighter blue. And the area to the south in orange is also another county area that is southeast Sierra Vista. The reason I included these county areas in my analysis is because they're potential future population growth areas as the city continues to expand. And so when looking at where should a future town center be built, it's important to include these areas that could very well become a part of the city. Just as a little antidote, one of these county enclaves was recently annexed about 2 weeks ago, so this is kind of a rapidly changing place. As far as the town center sites themselves go, there's 5 in total that I'm going to be looking at tonight with you all. The first one here is the Fry Boulevard site. This site's currently under leading consideration because of its existence along Sierra Vista's main arterial road, and it's also next door to Sierra Vista's largest park. These both make it kind of an attractive option for a town center. Then we have the second site, which is the West End site. There are those within the city government who think this would be an ideal site because it would allow for redevelopment in an otherwise dilapidated or older part of the city. The third site's the Tribute site, and while this looks like a random plot in the middle of the desert, it's actually the site of a future housing development. So there are those within the city, again, who think that this would be an ideal site as they could build up a town center in addition to residential development. The fourth site's what I call the West Fry site. It exists as a median between the Fry Boulevard site and the West End site, and it's basically a sizable plot of land that's also worth looking at for town center development. And lastly is the mall site. And this is basically an existing area of development where this would be more of a multi-nodal town center where the planners in the city and developers could work with existing businesses to help develop a town center. As far as the methods go for my analysis, I basically was interested in finding areas within the city where residents would have access to different amenities and ease of access for getting around. And so basically, if I were to split this into two main parts, the first part would be identifying and creating cost distance rasters. This is a result of identifying different features that people would want access to, and also the transportation surfaces, considering those. How do people get around? The next part is then applying fuzzy membership to show the data in a continuous manner. And then lastly, I'll apply zonal statistics in order to score each site. I'll explain this all a little bit more later moving forward. So here are those feature variables, or as I'll refer to them, amenities interchangeably. There's 16 different features I identified that people might want to have access to if they're trying to locate themselves within a town center or any residential area. These include things such as commercial centers, as well as post offices, schools, grocery stores, what have you. And in total, there was 1,014 individual sites used for this analysis, as you can see here. Then I wanted to identify the transportation surfaces in the city. So how exactly do people move around? And so I identified three main transportation methods in the city. Streets, which kind of resembles the automobile form of transportation. Then you have sidewalks, which takes into consideration pedestrian activity. And then lastly is the transit networks, to take into consideration those who use public transportation. These transportation surfaces were then turned into travel cost surfaces, which is something necessary for the cost distance tool. And as you can see here, this is the streets travel cost surface. So the idea behind this is it's not enough to say that just because there's a street, people have accessibility, but it's also worth taking into consideration the difficulty along moving along those paths. So here with the streets, you could see that the area in light blue is 0 to 100 feet from any street. It's basically the streets delineated themselves. And these are areas where if you're driving an automobile, you'd have very easy access moving around. The second shade of blue is 100 to 1,000 feet from the streets. These are areas that might be a little bit more difficult for moving around throughout the city if you're using an automobile. And then lastly, in dark blue, you have areas that are beyond 1,000 feet from the streets. And so this would be something that an automobile would have a very difficult time getting to, and therefore wouldn't be an ideal area for a town center. This was also repeated with the sidewalk layer with respective distances, as well as the transit layer with respective distances. All that put together results in the cost distance layers. There's 48 in total, which is basically a product of 16 of the feature variables along each of the three different transportation surfaces. So here on the right, you can see one example of these cost distance layers, which is looking at what is the cost distance of getting to the schools using the sidewalks. And areas in yellow have a low cost distance, and that could be due to just the fact that they're very close to the schools, or that the sidewalk layer itself is pretty robust in those areas. This was repeated for all different feature variables along all different transportation surfaces. Then finally, I applied fuzzy membership to each of these 48 cost distance layers. For those who don't know what fuzzy membership is, it's a way of taking otherwise discrete data and showing it in a continuous manner that's more applied to reality. So in a traditional suitability analysis, you might say a site is suitable if it falls within a half a mile of a grocery store, and anything that falls outside that half a mile is not suitable. But we know that in reality, this isn't really the case, as somebody living beyond that half mile marker might still utilize the grocery store. So where fuzzy membership comes in is it applies a value of 1 to the area that is suitable, and as distance increases or some sort of cost increases from that location, you get closer to 0. So rather than being 0 or 1, it's a decimal value between 0 and 1. This was applied to each of the 48 different cost distance layers, and it basically is a negative linear relationship. Finally, when combining each of the fuzzy membership layers, you get the final results here. So the 16 fuzzy membership layers relating to the streets resulted in this product, where you could see that the Fry Boulevard site and the West Fry site fall in that area of dark blue, or the area of high fuzzy value or high suitability. If someone were to start from any of these two locations and were trying to access other areas of the community using an automobile, they'd have a very easy time doing so from this place, those two places. I then reclassified this area just so you could visually see it a little bit better, where you could see in the light blue it's the high fuzzy values again, and those two sites fall within it. Finally, the zonal statistics comes into play here, where I was able to determine the average fuzzy value for each site in order to score them. And so you can see that the Fry Boulevard site has a slightly higher value than the West Fry site. I repeated this again with the sidewalk layer, looking at pedestrian activity. How would people move around, or where would they have the easiest time starting from using the sidewalk layer that I discussed earlier. And again, we see the Fry Boulevard site and the West Fry site have the highest fuzzy values. And again, with the zonal statistics, I was able to show that the Fry Boulevard site is slightly a little bit better in this case as well. And again, I also repeated this with the transit, where we see that the Fry Boulevard site and the West Fry site are the most superior. And zonal statistics in this case also show that the Fry Boulevard site is the most ideal. And then finally, the final result is combining all those transportation surfaces. And unsurprisingly, we see that the Fry Boulevard site and the West Fry site are the most ideal when looking at all transportation networks combined together. And again, the zonal statistics showed us that the Fry Boulevard site is superior in this case as well. So in conclusion, I identified different amenities that people would want to have access to when locating themselves within the city. I also looked at the transportation surfaces to see how they would get around. Combining those resulted in 48 different cost distance layers, and then I applied fuzzy membership to each. With those fuzzy membership layers, I then was able to combine them, and you saw the 4 fuzzy overlay results just right now. And then finally, zonal statistics allowed me to score each site to get a true value for each. And in conclusion, I can say that the Fry Boulevard site is the most ideal when considering residential suitability. And I think this is the case because it has close proximity to many different amenities in the community, and transportation in this area is pretty extensive, with all 3 identified kind of overlapping each other. Just as a special thanks, I'd like to thank these folks for all their help with this project. Without their help, this wouldn't have been possible. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions?